Welcome back to the Sean Trey Show. Today I have a very wonderful guest with me. Now, would you like to introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Of course. Well, thank you for having me, Sean.
You're welcome.
My name is Maria Brasero. I am a writer and a journalist.
Nice.
And I've been here in LA for 13 years almost. And I've been
Nice.
working as a journalist at LATV, which is the Latino alternative television, for 6 years.
Nice.
While on the side, I've been pursuing my career as a writer.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a storyteller at heart.
You know-
I like to tell stories either as a journalist or, fiction-wise. So, yes, that's what makes me tick.
I'm 100% with you. I've worn a lot of hats. I wear a lot of hats in my career. But telling stories, whether you're a journalist or whether I'm doing a podcast or whether it's all about telling stories. And writing is something that's so special. Now, tell me let's dive into the writing first, and then we'll go into the journal. Or actually, which would you prefer to talk about first, journalism or writing?
I don't, either or. I think they all go.
They all go together, right? Let's talk to someone
Exactly.
about your journalism. What do you do for your journalistic job? First of all, how did you get into it?
Okay, yes. So I grew up, I was born in Barcelona,
Nice.
and I always kind of felt kind of like a fish out of water because neither of my parents were from there. My dad's side of the family was in between Madrid and Argentina, and my mom's side of the family was from a little town. Only 20 people lived there, northwest of Spain, almost in Portugal. So,
Wow.
Barcelona, we speak Catalan. It's like
Yeah.
almost, some people is like, oh, we're not Spanish, we're Catalan. So I always had like an identity crisis. I wasn't Argentinian enough for my family in Argentina. They will call me La Gallega. That's how they call Spaniards in Argentina. From my family on my mom's side, I was the Catalan, right? And then in Barcelona, I never really felt Catalan because, my roots weren't there. So as an outsider, it's funny because you get to see, I was very observant, that's how I start to observe and then tell stories. And that was my way of communicating and getting into people and getting, accepted, because that's what you want to get when you're like a little kid. You just don't want to be different.
Yes.
You want to be like everyone else. You want to blend.
Yeah.
And for me, telling stories was how I got into people's hearts, right? So I remember like writing when I was 7 years old. I hated going to the dentist, and I started like my dad had this typewriter, and I started just writing about. I started imagining the dentist being some sort of vampire that was feeding on kids' teeth, something really crazy. My parents were like laughing so much.
That is an awesome story, by the way. You should run with that. No one's done that. That is a phenomenal children's movie or book right there. Just gonna interject really quick. Come back to that story because that's awesome. I would watch that.
Right? I know. And that's, my parents realized, okay, you have something about telling stories. But back then, it's like you don't make a living just writing stories. You have to be a journalist then, if that's what you like to do. So that's how I started into journalism, because it was more acceptable than just being a screenwriter. I don't think there was like a career back then, or maybe it was, but it was not something that my parents had accepted. So it's like, study communication. And then, see where that leads you. And that led me to work at a local TV network. That was my first job. I started as an intern, and then I was a PA, and I just loved, being on that TV. That was like a more news style, But I
Yeah.
just love the adrenaline. We have the news, we have this, we have to make it happen. Let's go to this place, let's cover, let's interview people.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. I was there for 2 years, but I soon realized it was, Spain is not like America, that you can kind of climb the ladder if you're good at it. There are like way more opportunities. The pie on entertainment, it's really, really small, and there are like
Yeah.
few players eating that pie, and they're not sharing it. So
That's really interesting. That's a common phenomenon that I've heard a lot of people describe in the different markets. So
yeah, that's one of the great things about America is like you get. I had opportunities here that back in Spain I would have never dreamt of unless I was
Yeah.
the daughter of or the wife
Yep.
of or something like that.
I understand that well living here in Vietnam. We see that a lot too. It's like there's someone's cousin or friend who is in a position that they maybe shouldn't be,
Nepotism is, I mean, don't get me wrong, it exists everywhere. But here, if you're not good, then you get
don't-
more opportunities. But then if you're not good, they kick you out. There,
That's true.
you just stay, qualified or not.
Yeah.
So I came to I came to UCLA to study. I did a certificate on entertainment. I said, okay, I already am a journalist. Now I want to explore more the entertainment business, and I did like a general studies. So I studied directing, writing, cinematography, even
Nice.
acting. Soon enough, I just realized I'm not a director. And I'm not an actress. Hell no, I'm not a cinematographer or or an editor. But I love the producing. This is something I can do, and writing too. At that time, my English wasn't really good, so I wasn't that comfortable writing in English. So I kind of let that on the back seat, and I said, I'm going to focus on being a producer. Once that happened, I started my first job was at a sales distribution company, Myriad Pictures. I have really good memories there, and
Nice.
there I was an assistant. From there, I went to WME, which is a talent agency, and I also was an assistant of the only Spanish speaker agent at the time. And that job was brutal.
That's pretty cool.
That's cool. Yeah,
It's
that
cool,
was cool.
but I could see that being a really intense job.
Oh my god, I had anxiety at that. I would never never think that a job about scheduling meetings and rolling calls would cause me these high level stress moments where I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking, did I reconfirm this meeting or not? I was like sweating.
So
they make you feel it's like life or
it's
death.
crazy. Well, it's just like this, like with this podcast, right? Everyone, even for you, you texted me, hey, I just want to confirm. And I was like, oh my God, is it right now? Did I miss our appointment? Just 2 days ago. And I was just like, oh, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was just like pouring sweat. I'm like, oh God, did I just sleep through someone's appointment? Oh my goodness. It's stressful. Scheduling things is extremely stressful. And for an agency like that's that big, you're dealing with people around the world. And so there's like your time zones are a thing.
Yeah.
And oh my. Oh.
No, it was. I lasted there less than a year because my blood pressure just was going through the roof. It's like, I don't want to have a heart attack in my 20s. It's not worth it.
I feel you.
And then, I took kind of like a sabbatical time where I even thought about switching careers, become a translator maybe, And in that time, a friend of mine was working at LATV and a job opening for being a talent booker, open up. And I had a experience with talent. I was doing that at WME. So I said, sure, I'll interview. I love the vibe. It's a minority Latino owned company. so I felt very connected to the team. It was a small team, but we all
That's
worked very
awesome.
well together. And, as a small company, you wear many hats. So I started
Yeah.
only booking talent for a talk show, and then soon I became a segment producer for another one, and then one day I became a reporter because
That's awesome.
we went to cover like a red carpet, and then the talent is like, oh, I'm walking the red carpet, I'm not covering the red carpet. I'm like, oh, but we have a camera person and we have a segment about, okay, you cover it. And then I was just thrown in there with the mic covering the red carpet, and I love that, and that evolved into me doing the entertainment segments, and
That's
covering red
awesome.
carpets, doing junkets. um so yes, I absolutely, love the job. I think it's also good because aside from the entertainment, where we focus a lot, we also feature a lot of Latino business, and Latino personalities
That's
and
awesome.
people who were in the shadows for a long time, and now we give
See,
them a platform to,
yes,
hey, come here, because
yes.
we are, it's just the Latinos, Hispanics and Latinos are not a minority anymore,
No,
really.
that's one of the things that is always like growing up in California. One of the things that was really interesting was like when people ask, what was the food that you guys ate all the time in California? And I was like, well, Mexican food. Like it was not a specialty meal. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like a
yeah.
major part of California cuisine. And it's like,
Exactly.
and people were like, well, didn't you guys eat hamburgers there? And I was like, no, no.
Oh,
It was like, well, I mean, sure, there's In and Out and stuff like that, but you
yeah.
look at like the best restaurants in Southern California have always to me been like the different Latino restaurants, whether it be because it's not just Mexican food. There's just this huge Latino influence
Yeah.
in Los Angeles and in San Diego, and so for me, I've always thought it was really funny when people try to America has become multicultural. It was
Yeah.
always, but people tried to deny that, and they tried to say, "Oh no, it's this," and it's like, no,
I
and
was
that's
like,
the beauty
no.
of like you go to, and that's one of the things I love about like Los Angeles. You go down to say, and I'm just going to talk about food because for a second it shows the level of diversity. Say you want the best pho, roll down to Little Saigon. If you
Yeah.
want the best Brazilian barbecue, they have that over in Culver City. You have these different places that in East LA, it's some of the most amazing Mexican food in the world. And
Yeah.
you have all of these pockets. K-Town has the best Korean food, and
Yeah,
it's
and
everything.
Asian fusion is a
Yes.
thing. It's like, that
Yes.
happens here.
It is, and that's the coolest thing is like when we came back, and my wife is Vietnamese, and when we were eating in the U.S. and we ate some of the Vietnamese fusion, she was like, "This is amazing," and it's something entirely new. But you can only get that in a melting pot. You can only get that in a
Yeah.
place where you get all these cultures coming together. And you're right, Latino people are not a minority. It's
No,
like
it's a very predominantly, ethnicity, for
yeah,
sure, for sure.
yeah. Well, that is awesome. Now you are now on the red carpet. You are
Yes.
hosting things. You are that's cool. Now, how did you feel about going from behind? Because that's a major transition from behind the camera to in front of the camera. Behind the camera,
Yeah,
you can sit back there and look however you want, be however you want. But in front of the camera,
I know. I was so nervous that first segment, uh, my boss at the time
sweat.
just like loved it because I was so nervous that I also
Yeah.
didn't know who I was interviewing because I didn't like study the people. I thought that's okay, that's the host who's gonna do it. I'm just there
Oh
making sure
man.
the camera works and everything. So I was just asking, oh, how is your latest movie, to a person who was a singer? And they're like, oh, things like
I've
that.
been there. I've been there.
And it turns so funny that like my boss is like, this is the character you have to play. I'm like, I'm not playing any character. I was just like, trying to survive and being like, and it was really really funny. And then the second junket I did ever, because it's like, okay, let's test you one more time and see how this goes, because I think you have potential. I wasn't sure. I was also, it made me very, my heart the palpitations.
Right.
I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. But I like to push myself out of my comfort zone, and for sure that was out of my comfort zone.
Right.
So my junket, my first junket, the second appearance on camera, that was with the movie Bad Santa 2. So I'm interviewing
Fun.
Billy Bob Thornton.
Who must have been really interesting to interview.
Yes, and I say, okay, I have to make it funny because this is for like an entertainment TV show. So what can I do? So I came up with 3 presents that I wanted Bad Santa to give me, because the good Santa wasn't giving it to me. So it's like, oh, maybe the Bad Santa gives that to me. So it's like, hey, Billy, can you read this? And, this list. And so I put like silly things, like I wanted an apartment in Malibu. The second thing is like, I wanted an annual pass in a Korean spa, because I love Korean spas.
Oh, right.
And he read...
Phenomenal.
He read Anal Pass. So
oh my God. Oh my God.
And I'm like, red. The whole room is cracking up. Billy's like, what? I'm like, no. Anal, I know, not anal. And, we were just cracking up. We could not finish the interview, because every time he was going to talk, he was just laughing and laughing.
Oh my God.
That interview, where like everyone loved it.
I'm sure.
It was one of our most views interviews. And then it's like, okay, you're gonna do that. You're gonna be our junket and red carpet person. And I loved it. As I said, it's a different experience being in. You have to be way more on your feet. You have to be quick, fast.
Yeah.
I also sometimes would say things in Spanish or my accent, but that was part of the charm. It was part of like my signature move. And I've been loving it. One of the things I don't do is I don't usually wear makeup, because that's my thing. But that's like kind of statement.
That's cool. Yeah.
I think, if you don't want to, I'm all very natural, not putting anything in the face, any chemicals. I also had a lot of eye infections for eyeshadows and eyeliners that I said, enough. I'm just gonna go like this, bare face. But it's funny because I would get into, those junkets. Sometimes you have like a makeup artist, and sometimes it's like, can you just touch me a little bit, not too much. It's like, oh, for working in a Latino network, you don't wear makeup. That's weird, because there are some certain stereotypes, right? Like Latino women have to go all like this, and so all these little experiences, I was kind of, like writing them, because that's what like kind of inspired me to the project I have now with HBO, which is called LA Tinas. And all of these things kind of come there, because there's so many stereotypes still out there, like so many. And it's really hard.
Yeah, no. You hit the nail on the head. Stereotypes are really funny, because we all have experienced them, and we see there are people that dive into the stereotype. Like, there are people who embrace it and go, this is me. But then there's so many people that are not that, and it's interesting, because I'm an American living outside the US. And so there's already this immediate, like, well, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you wear cowboy boots? Do you wear a cowboy? Yeah. Do you have a gun? How many pickup trucks do you have? And I was like, well, that's not me. I've never owned a pickup truck in my life. I don't wear boots. I wear sandals when I'm at home in California. And so it's different. And so, but stereotypes are something that I've always been fascinated by, because especially for writing, and you see this for when I was an actor, casting, so many people, like, you go and one of the things that with casting is like, you would see, my wife is an Asian woman. And when my wife was a celebrity here in Vietnam. She was the first winner of Vietnam Idol. And she's had some castings in the West, but they're always really, really bad Asian stereotypes, you know? And it's like, she had one that was like, woman who works in a nail salon. And she's like, I'm not doing that. And she's like, I'm not doing that. Like, not disrespecting those people who do work in that or who have that. Yeah, but
it's not her experience at all.
Yes. She's this powerhouse of a singer. And she's like, I mean, if it was a musical, you know, maybe she would look at embracing that. But she's like, I want to do something that's representative of who I am. And who I am, and who I think and the vision that she wants to project. Dive in about I interrupted you, but yeah, that's such a fascinating topic for me.
Yeah, so that's how LA Tinas was born, because every time, you know, I would even watch TV, all the Latina roles were very stereotypical. Either the maid, the sexy mama like Sofia Vergara in Modern Family, right? Or the cop. There were like certain roles and certain looks. I had a really dear friend of mine. She's 100% Mexican, but she's very white, light skin. And she would go to castings for Mexican roles. And it's like, you don't look Mexican enough. And she's like, what do you mean I don't look Mexican enough? Right?
Right.
I'm 100%. But they always say, okay, no, Mexicans are these people. You know, they have to have this certain looks. And if you look into Latin America, all the Hispanic, they come in all shapes and also different cultures. It's really different. Like, you know, that's one of the things Americans love, is putting labels. So, you know, the fact that they put Hispanic and Latino label to so many different cultures, like, because a Cuban has nothing to do with a Mexican. Yeah. No?
Yeah. Right.
And then it comes with also different race, which makes things even more complicated. Because if you're like African American, okay, you're black and you're born in America. You know, it's easier. But if you're Latino, you can be any race. From a lot, like more than 20 different cultures, you know, so it's like it gets more complicated.
My friend Nasambu came on last night, and she is a Kenyan American songwriter. She's from Kenya. And, you know, and she was, you know, and it's really interesting that I notice Americans do this with multiple continents, you know, like African music. Well, that's literally like saying
it's a
European music.
Continent.
It's a whole continent. You know, it's this big, beautiful place. And South America, like,
has nothing to do with Zimbabwe. I'm sorry.
Exactly. And the same thing for, like, you know, Latino is like, sure, there might be a common language, but it's not. You know, Mexican Spanish and Argentine Spanish, and I have it in a different degree, because my father's British. And my mother's American. And though my father grew up in the States, you know, there are things culturally that are different, dramatically different. And you know, I work in Vietnam. There's a lot of Brits here. And, you know, and the way that the British people will often interact with people is extremely different than Americans. And they're like, people are like, oh, you all speak English. There's differences.
Oh, there's a lot of differences. Yes. And then Australians also have nothing to do with it.
Right. So coming back to where I cut you off. My apologies.
This is where I, you know, with my husband, once we were talking, and I was like so upset. I think watching I was watching a show, like it's all like theory about Latinos, but it's like, oh, there's people from East LA, they're always cholas, they're always poor. I don't see myself reflected in there. And I know a lot of people do, and that's great. There have to be shows for that. But like, put all the Latinas in that box, I just found it frustrating. So my husband is like, well, why don't you write about you and your friends? Because literally you have friends from all over Latin America, and all of you are actually immigrants. You were not born here. So you were kind of like fish out of water, coming here, with the idea of American dream, let's make this. And, you all of you had different, experiences, some slap
Yeah.
in the face from that American dream is like, oh, you came for that?
Yeah.
Boom. This is
right.
the reality check,
Yeah.
And all the stories you had when you were working as an assistant in the entertainment business, all the things you've seen. So I start crafting these 4 Latina women. They're very different among themselves.
That's awesome.
And they all have, and I remember when I was, pitching that to producers, things, they say, oh, what makes them Latinas? And I'm like, this is not something about look how Latina I am, because this is not something that you people do normally. I want like Chinese woman seeing this, who's an immigrant, and say, oh, I feel that like the same thing. I also had struggles with my accent, even if she's not Latina, but she's also an outsider. So it's more about what it is to be new to the city of LA and also explore this city, because it's amazing. Like,
it's a
people
huge
tend
city.
to think, yes, it's an ugly city. Coming from Europe, you see all these beautiful, old, ancient cities, or in South America, there's like all this natural beauty, all these different things, and then you come to LA that it looks like a set.
It really does. Everything's and maybe downtown LA is tall, but literally all the rest of LA is like single-story buildings. Single or 2-floor buildings.
All is spread out. Like I remember, really naively, I thought, oh, I can just walk anywhere. And I was like, I can't walk nowhere. I need a car when I walk. So all these little things, and I created these 4 characters that are outside of these stereotypes, and that's one of the things that this initiative at HBO Palante really like, because they kind of want to tell different stories. We already seen the stories from the narcos, the maids, the cholos. Let's see other stories.
I have my friend. When I work music, and so I was looking online for people to help collaborate with for my wife, and I met this amazing musician and beat maker from Colombia, and his name's Nico, and when I was talking to Nico, one of the things that he had said is he's like, we were talking about Colombia, and he was like, well, yeah, it's a lot more than just what you see in Narcos, and I was like, it's like, yeah, and so that what that did to me is I had watched the show Narcos, and I was just like, well, let's do it. And in one day, I just sat down and I was like, I don't want to be that person that, it might be a great show, but I don't want to be that person that like my entire cultural awareness is about just from watching a TV show. And so I sat down and I dove into it. And I was a history major. So
nice.
I love studying history.
What type of history?
I studied, my specialty was on world religions and philosophies. So I did, I love to study, I studied about all the major world religions. I loved reading about the Bhagavad Gita and Tao Te Ching. And, I was kind of focused in on Zen Buddhism, which is the original form of Zen, and it was really, really beautiful stuff like that. And so I moved to Asia to study that, and I love studying Taoism and Lao Tzu and all of the different writers, and Zhuangzi. And so for me, I just would try to, everything has a place. Everything has a place and time that it comes from. And so it's always really interesting to study that, because for me, I love world religions and I try to boil them down. Aldous Huxley, the great writer, there was something that he called the perennial philosophy, which was the kind of the the underlying message of all the world religions. And it was essentially, be nice to other people and treat them well.
Yeah, that's all what they have in common, right?
Yeah, just treat people well and they will treat you well. Like the idea of the golden rule, it's like be nice to others and they'll be nice to you. And so, yeah, but that was what I studied. And so for going back to the Narcos thing, I deep dove into Colombian history, and I was just like, I was just blown away by, how much I didn't know. And I wasn't judging myself for not knowing it because the opportunity hadn't been there, but it was really beautiful.
Exactly. No, there's so many countries and cultures that, sometimes you just don't have the opportunity.
Right. But that's what's beautiful about someone like you taking this story and going, let's meet our neighbors. Let's meet people that are around us, that are really special.
Exactly. Also, because that way kind of it humanizes, this particular ethnicity. Because otherwise you just put, oh no, if we only see Latinos as mates or as the help or something, that's how the rest of America and the world is going to see us, unfortunately, because TV is like sometimes the source of knowledge from a lot of for a lot of people,
And you hit the nail on the head with like one of my best friends, Dorian Silva. When we were best friends from high school, we went to high school together. From 8th grade up until university, we were together every day. And we played volleyball together, and Dorian is from East LA, and Dorian is a huge entrepreneur, and he is this, this absolute dynamic guy, and he doesn't fit the mold, and he is probably one of the people that I admire most because he came from, a really working class background, and he built up this empire that he now has. And I'm just forever proud of him because, he stepped outside of his box that everyone was trying to put on him. Let's put this box on you. And I remember all through high school and college, people were always trying to put him in a box, and he defied that. And I love that about him.
It's like, do you put yourself in a box?
Yeah, right. You can find your own box.
Exactly. Put your own box if you want. I'm not putting myself in any box.
That's beautiful.
I think people feel comfortable.
Yes.
When they have labels, okay, you're this and I'm this, and and in a certain way, labels sometimes can be healthy, but sometimes they're like no, and some people for them they're limiting. So it's. I think we have to learn that. Not everything is black or white. There's a lot of grays, and sometimes you cannot label them, and it's fine.
No. Well, and I think that the labeling system was used in a very controlling way. And there was this, and I'm not just talking about race. I'm talking about, place in society. And, and there was like, I remember once where I'm trying to figure out how to tell this story in a positive spin. I was working and I met this person and we became friends. And then one day I talked about my career, and this person was like, I'm not going to talk to you about that. Know your place. And literally their words were not know your place, but it was know your place. And I thought that we had this relationship that was because the person would tell me all about their life. And then it was just very interesting that I was just like, oh.
Wow. Like know your limits, know your place. You're not. Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was just like, my apologies. Let me step back for a second.
Let me go back to my place.
Okay. And it was very interesting that was a, and I don't know why people do that beyond just there is a system that people are used to. And I think it's this safety. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, no, me neither. And I think that was, the way that the U.S. started like putting those labels was for the census purposes, right? Oh, we need to see where are the people coming from and what they speak the most. And but yeah, it's aside from that, like, okay, maybe you want. I don't think that system of the census is done in other countries.
No.
About putting their race. I think they just, okay, you're born here, this neighborhood, fine. They don't. I was so confused the first time I had to fill, because
Yes.
there was different options. Mediterranean. I was like, okay, well,
Yes.
technically I was born in Barcelona, so I'm in the Mediterranean, but that also goes all the way to Turkey, and and it's just a very okay. And then Hispanic or Latino, then but I'm like, but there's Caucasian, and I don't know. Am I this? Am I
Right?
that? I was so confused, and I
When
grew up with an identity crisis back in because
as you
my
said,
family
right?
was very multi. So I'm
Hmm.
like, I just don't want to, and you can decline. It's like I don't want to say it because I don't. I mean, I don't care. I'm
Right?
like, I can be more than one. Can I just check Hispanic,
How
Latino,
about I'm a couple of
Mediterranean?
these?
How
Yeah.
about it?
My daughter, when I was doing her paperwork to get her birth certificate and her registration of being born abroad, and I was looking, and it's like check ethnicities,
Yeah.
and and I was just like, well, and then I was like, because here's Caucasian, here's Asian, and it's like check one, and I was like,
Just
and the person
50-50.
and the person was like, and the person behind the booth was like, just check Asian, and I was like, that's a little bit, judgmental and racist too.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
she was like, well, she's not all this and she's not all that, but you should put her here because she's not this. And I was like, that was
That was
that was
rude. Yeah.
that was really, it was really, yeah, okay. But that point is when you have all these boxes that have to be checked, you immediately force people to try to fit into a box. And
Yeah.
like you said, none of us fit. None of us fit.
No. 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 And they make you like, okay, choose one. And like, why do I have to choose? If we're like, like your daughter, she's lucky to have this multicultural background. Why
Yep.
she needs to choose one of the two sides? It's like she's both, she's
Well,
50-50.
there's an interesting thing that I came up as an actor, and that was my thing. And one of the things is when you go to sign up for the casting networks, that's like a thing that an aspiring actor has to do. You must go sign up for these casting networks, and I hated it. You know why I hated it? Because there was it was lists and lists and lists of skills and things and attributes that you just checked. And it was like, go through all these checks, what's your body type, and what skills do you have? What this do you have? What this do you have? And you literally have to check it. And then that's it. That's the end. And there's not like a bio section. There's, a small one, but like,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not a bunch of checklists. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
No one is.
Exactly. I'm not just my hobbies and my qualifications. I'm more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I'm my story. And that's
Yeah.
where we come back to stories. People
exactly.
are their stories. Now tell
Exactly.
me, sorry, forgive me. There's always a little bit of lag here with this software, and so I always feel like I'm cutting people off. I feel so horrible.
Yeah.
With your story, with your project, what are some of the goals that you would like to accomplish with your project?
Well, so I would like to, first of all, that it goes to series. Right now, it's in development, and well, actually, it's in pre-development. I don't know what that means, but because it's we have like 1 year to just package it very well, have like as many elements as possible, and that includes finding the right casting. Even though at that point you cannot guarantee that they're going to be attached in the end, because that's the network's call. But try to have as much material as possible. They're taking me to Sundance, which I'm very excited. It's also going to be the first time solo time I have since I became a mom in the pandemic.
Right.
So it's going to be like a nice little vacation from motherhood.
I'm a father
are,
that's been going
yes.
constant since mine was born, so I understand. I understand.
Right. um, and then it's my goal is that it becomes like a series, and with that first of all it's going to be completely bilingual, because that's
I love
how
that.
my experience here in LA, like I would speak Spanish with my friends, but then English kind of with the rest of the world, and then with my parents and Spanish too. So you have this back and forth that it's very natural, but we don't see that reflected in many shows, really. So
No, not
that's
at
one
all.
of the things. It's going to be completely bilingual, and also with different accents, because as we said
Yeah.
before, Spanish, the Mexican Spanish is different
Girl.
from the Argentinian, and
Yes.
it's different from the Puerto Rican one. So I want to embrace and have people from those places, because one of in my opinion, the mistakes that Narcos did is that it happened in Colombia, and they casted just Latino actors that were not Colombian. Like, actually, the guy who played Pablo
Interesting.
Escobar is Brazilian,
Yeah,
and the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Americans didn't care, because they don't know the nuances of the different accents.
Mm-hmm.
But the Spanish speaking people were kind of like, why couldn't they find like Colombian actors to play a Colombian guy if it's going to be shot in Spanish? Why are they that, so
No,
I want to respect those, differences and nuances.
and I think Americans don't
Hmm.
necessarily get it until you play it for them. Like there was one, the movie Black Hawk Down was a great
Hmm.
movie, but in that, a lot of these British actors were cast as Americans. And it was really interesting to hear. And I mean, the great actors do different accents all the time. Hugh Jackman, for a long
Hmm.
time, a lot of people didn't know
Yeah,
he was Australian. And
he was
you
a
know,
trend, right? Yeah.
what why is he speaking with this Australian accent? But and there's amazing English actors who do American accents. But it was interesting because in Black Hawk Down, there were a couple times where I could hear these Brits just really chewing on the American accent, and it was interesting because this is the American military is really, a lot of those people are kind of like, are not, they're not from the major cities. A lot of the military is made up of people more from regional
Yeah.
areas and more countryside. And, you get some of those regional dialects and that are coming up and that would be reflected in a real, and I think when my friend was watching that with me one day and they're like, that guy sounds funny. I was like,
Good
and
point.
yeah, good point. And I think that people don't think about that. And I was going to ask you, like, in American film, what dialect do people, are most of the people because Spanish has so many different dialects, but how do the Americans, do they just cast it wrong, or is it that is there one dialect that is picked more often than others?
They call it the Spanish neutral, but it's
It's
basically
not.
Mexican.
That's what I
That's
was thinking.
yeah. But it's funny, they call it Spanish neutro. I was like, it's not neutral. There's like not a neutral thing. Everything
Yeah,
has like an accent. And you're just
yeah,
trying, as I say, just to put everything, all these different cultures, all these different accents in one, brand for you to feel, okay, we cover everything. But everyone, that listens to this neutral Spanish is like, oh, this is Mexican. Which
yeah,
is fine, but don't call it neutral. Just call
yeah.
it by what it is. But also it depends. Like here, California, because the majority of Hispanic and Latino are
Hmm.
Mexican. There's more Mexicans. Maybe Miami is a different story. I don't know because
Right.
I never
Yeah,
lived there. But I know there's more Caribbean
yeah.
and other, and also like New York. East Coast is a different vibe.
It's a different game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. And this is things that I think, and these are things that I hope will start coming into film, that I hope will start being looked at because, it's like, like we were talking earlier about the standard presentation or casting of, for Asian woman, for my wife when she was a Dutch, and it was like, this or this. And then you said for Latino, there were these different roles that you always see. I hope that we can start portraying people differently, and the wide variety of careers. And this is something that like we get with my daughter all the time. And this is something that, because at the end of the day, we want to teach our children that they can be whatever they want. That's one of the things that for me, I'm tall. And so every time I'm 6'1", I'm not crazy tall, but I'm tall here.
You're tall, yes.
And one of the things that's interesting is that people look at my daughter and she's built just like me. She is tall and lean. She is lanky and just like daddy. And so because she's got that tall, skinny build, people are like, she could be a model. And I'm like, or a scientist, or a doctor,
exactly.
or a lawyer, or a movie producer, or a singer, or whatever else she wants. Why are you immediately with this 5-year-old child going, fit in this box?
Yeah, no, you're putting that seed, and people are like, kids are like sponges. So if she keeps hearing that, that's what she's gonna, have in her subconscious mind. And it's good that you say, no, you can be all these other things, and that's, what you say. It's important to have all this diversity in, also even now that you mentioned the modeling thing, now a person who's not like all slim and thin can be a model, can be a plus size model, or it can be, and thank God that change and expand, and it's not. We are still a long way to go, but I think we're heading into the right direction.
And that was one of the things that one of the reasons that I created my show, was because I feel like for myself, I need to be doing more to help create the world that I want to create for my daughter, and, if she chooses grandchildren, and, and just other people's children, you know what I mean? Because then I'm not going to assume that my daughter will want to have kids. That's her decision.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's her thing. And, and I think that's kind of the direction we have to look, is like, well, for me, I'm looking is just, I want to make, your child is not to the YouTube place yet. And we limit what we show my daughter, and I really selectively screen. But it's interesting. I will hand her something, and it's an educational TV show, and there are some really good ones out there, because, I want her to hear both English and Vietnamese because we live here. 2 seconds later, I turn around and there is some absolute junk on. And I was like, well, how did you get there? And she's like, I just pressed this button. And I was just like, what is this? What is this? And it's horrible. Some of the content that goes out that people are going, it's for kids. No, it's not.
I know. It's like, these new generations, they have too many. It's too easy to get anything,
Yeah. Now, if you could go back in time, and you could go back to your younger self. We're not going to change anything. I know everyone's been watching Loki, and we don't want any variants or anything. But you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice. What advice would you give your younger self?
I would say trust your instincts, trust your gut feeling, because it never really lies. If something feels wrong, it's because it's probably wrong. So, because I always try to rationalize things, and it's like, oh no, maybe. But then, it turned out that my gut feeling was right. So that's one advice I would give myself, like always trust your intuition, because the energy doesn't lie. Words,
No.
people can trick you into anything, saying things, but see their energy, see their actions, and see if that aligns with what they're saying. And then, that's gonna help. And also for myself, I would say try to always align what you think you say and you do. It's the same, because that's, when you put all the energy into one direction, is like way more powerful. If you're thinking one thing but you're saying something because you want to fit in, and then you're doing another thing too, that's like you're just delaying the process, delaying the road. Is like you could go more straight and you're just going this way just because you don't really know. So yeah, that's another thing I would say to my younger self. Be true to yourself, and align all the things.
And I think that if we can teach people, because I think so many people spend so much time trying to fit in a place that they might not fit, whether it be working at an agency that's not, and it might be perfect job for someone else, but it wasn't for you.
Exactly.
I've had my fair share of jobs too that I shouldn't have stayed at, but I stayed there because people told me it was good for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's really profound. Now, let's imagine that you have Aladdin's lamp. The genie pops out. You get some wishes. What would you wish for?
Oh, wishes. Well, I wish... so many wishes. Like, for myself, for humanity, I would wish, like... Let's see, this is a profound question. Because I want to think it
seems simple, right? But it's
simple, but it's not. I would like to that what I'm doing has a positive outcome for humanity, because I think that's, I love that. Ultimately the goal. So I would say, guide me to, if my purpose is right, then help me to be the best writer. Because if that's going to help millions of people, to through that stories, maybe find themselves. And I think that would be one of the wishes.
I love that. Yeah, it's like you want to make a difference.
Yeah.
Make a difference.
Yeah, because I think that's why we're here in this world. We're just not here to spend the years and survive and keep doing. No, we're just here to make a positive impact. Because, I also I love Buddhism. I do believe in karma.
Yeah, there's this one great thing that I absolutely love in Zen Buddhism. It was called in Japanese Buddhism, they would call it the Enso. And essentially what the monks would do is they would practice painting this circle. And so this became its own thing. The idea of, so there was this beautiful thing that the monks every day, because what's more perfect than a circle? It has no edges. It goes on into infinity. So every day the monks would practice painting a circle, and they were on a journey to always paint a better circle. But there was also an understanding that every single painting was perfect. And so there was this two sides that, like, sure, always try to be better, but also be accepting of where you're at. And I think that is the life that I try to live, is like every day we can be better, but it's also I'm doing the best I can. As a parent, that is so obviously true. You think you said to your daughter, son or daughter?
Son.
17 months, right? You before they come, I read books. I thought that I had it down, and then little one.
No, they just once you thought you knew the answers, the questions changed. And then I'm like, this is not how it's in the book. This is not what YouTube video says that you can do to calm a crying baby. It's not working.
No, none of it works. There was one book that I read, and it was just this. I remember it was a very tongue-in-cheek book of parenting. It was kind of like playing jokes the whole time, and that was actually the one book that was most useful to me. It was because it was like, don't take everything so seriously. You'll make it, but just be
Yeah,
patient with
you'll
yourself.
survive. It'll be fine.
That's about it. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. I had
Of
a
course.
wonderful
Thanks for
time.
inviting me.
It was awesome. Yeah. And I would love to hear if you ever want to come back on and share some updates about how your project is going. I would love that.
Perfect. Yes, I hope I have some good updates sometime soon
Yeah.
that I can share
We're
with you.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.